Good morning to you. Your pal Big Al Larcher here. Another week of football, another week of fantasy. Last week, I talked about Justin Fields being kind of the steal of the week, and it turned out that was the right answer. Unfortunately, the stack didn't turn out well, and it kind of failed overall. And I went a little too heavy on Josh Jacobs last week. Everyone said fade. Everyone said fade, and I just couldn't do it. And I just had too much exposure. And even though I got a lot right as far as stacks go, as far as kind of sneaky plays, um, just eating that Josh Jacobs chalk really kind of killed me. So go contrarian. That's the message pretty much every week. This week it's an interesting slate. There's no game that really stands out. There's a couple over unders that are worth looking at. There's a couple key players that we'll focus on here. I mean, just starting with the quarterbacks, Josh Allen is projected with the highest ceiling on the board, and it's another week where he's either going to do it or he's not. And right now, there's a lot of ownership projecting that he's going to do it, which means it's probably a good week to walk away from Josh Allen in Buffalo. I mean, they're playing the Jets, and we've seen from Buffalo that regardless of the opponent, they still put up the points. They're still aggressive. So by all means, Josh Allen is probably a very good cash play. Even at his price, it's getting a little steep now. He's at 8,500. Um, I mean, once he hits 9K, it's like you can't even consider him anymore because it's just going to be too crippling uh, just on being able to get a ceiling with the rest of your roster. Um, but yeah, I mean, he has the highest ceiling. He's definitely worth playing. But I would fade him in tournament. But that's where it gets tough because there really isn't a good answer this week at tournament because the guys who really like are in good situations with high pacing games are expensive, or they're chalky. Justin Herbert, great play going up against the Atlanta Falcons, high ceiling, 7,200. So you're going to save, over $1,000 from Josh Allen, and a lot of the pieces are fairly inexpensive as well for Justin Herbert. Um, but the problem is, again, he's still 7,200, so it's not like you're punting. Uh, and then the other side of that game is the Atlanta Falcons. Marcus Mariota, he's projecting well. His ownership is good. He's at about 5% ownership projections right now. His ceiling's about 25 points, and his cost is 5,300. So I mean, he really is kind of sticking out as a good play this week. Um, who you stack him with, that's going to be a question, and we'll get into that once we start talking game stacks. When we go down to the top three over unders on the week, we'll get into a little more detail there. But I mean, he's put up 24 points twice this year. Once against Carolina, once against San Francisco. Those were his two highest game totals. So 25 points is realistic, and at 5,300, it's just a great value. Kirk Cousins, 6,200. Nobody's playing Kirk Cousins. That's going to be an up-tempo game that works really well. The guy that I think everyone's going to be on outside of Josh Allen is Geno Smith at 5,800. He's been balling all year. He has almost a 30-point season. He's right about 28 points in projections. He projects for 20. His ceiling's about 28. And it's just the price point. It really is kind of the perfect play. But again, you're looking at ownership now of over 10%. And that's where it gets a little dicey, where you start trying to look for pivots. And some of those pivots are like, Derek Carr at 5,400. No ownership, decent projections, but, I'm not comfortable playing Derek Carr. I'm not comfortable playing Vegas against Jacksonville there. As a matter of fact, I'd probably prefer saving the $200 and getting Trevor Lawrence in that same game. I also like. I just want to mention I still do like Justin Fields again this week. He's going to be catching a lot more ownership, and the game projects to be just really slow and plotting. But we've seen Miami, when they're pushed, they play fast, and Chicago is playing a lot faster right now. They're trusting the offense, and that game's decent. I mean, Bears are projected for 20 points. Miami's projected for 25 points. So, I mean, there's enough touchdown equity in that game to get you some real ceilings. So, Chicago, Miami, I'm definitely going to be playing some Justin Fields this week. And I also want to mention Tua Tagovailoa is 6,700, and he's under 5% ownership. And we know what he could do. We've seen his ceiling, and he's going up against the Chicago Bears. There's no secondary. Actually, the Bears secondary is not bad. I should say there's no secondary. That's probably their biggest strength. But there's no pass rush. I think that's kind of the fear with Tua is that Miami's just going to pound the ball on the ground, um, which means Mozart's a pretty good play this week. But uh, if you think somehow the Bears shut down the run or Miami just wants to show off a little, and this thing goes to the air, he's another good play. Running back this week is going to be the last couple of weeks. It's been kind of confusing as to what you want to do. This week, it's not super clear. It's another week where there's just a lot of options. There's a lot of guys who just project really well. Um, Eckler's in a smash spot. He's also the most expensive running back on the board. He's looking at about 20% ownership, so people are going to be playing him. But I'm okay eating 20% ownership on a running back, especially of Eckler's usage. He's involved in the passing game as much as he's involved in the run. His ceiling is 35 points, which just looking at overall ceilings with wide receivers thrown in the mix, he has the highest ceiling on the slate of any skilled player. So Austin Eckler is a guy, especially cash. I mean, if you could get to him, almost 9K, it's gonna be hard to do. But if you could find a place to do it, he's definitely worth playing. I think his cost is going to hurt you a little bit in tournaments where the fade is probably the right move there. Tyreek Hill has a 33-point ceiling. He's 8,500 against the Bears. Cooper Kupp is almost 9K. He's a 30-point ceiling. And then the cheapest of all the options is Aaron Jones, projecting well against Detroit. And that game is supposed to really go through the ground. Green Bay just loves running the ball. They like slowing games down. They like taking the entire play clock. Green Bay just kills fantasy momentum. But when that happens, the run game makes sense. So Aaron Jones is going to be a really good play this week at 7,400. He's going to be the cheapest option you could get for about a 30-point ceiling. DeAndre Hopkins, 7,900. He's projecting around 30 points. Stephon Diggs at 8,400, also projecting at 31 points. So those are the six big players as far as cost and ceiling. And again, the cheapest option in there is Aaron Jones. He is going to have the highest ownership of that entire group at 20%. But like I said, I'm okay with a 20% ownership. And I think he's probably a better play than Austin Eckler just based on savings of over $1,000. You'll get an extra $1,200 by going with Aaron Jones. Josh Jacobs, he bit a lot of people last week, myself included. I think he put up like 6 points. He is projecting this week in my model is the best play on the running back board again, and I'm not gonna run from him. The problem is you would hope that the field would kind of run from him after he put up 7.4 points last week, um, 10 attempts, so he got half the attempts he normally gets, and that Raiders game is just ugly. I didn't go back and watch it. I mean, from what I saw, it was gross. The Raiders couldn't get anything done, and the Saints just clobbered them, 24-0. How often do you see a goose egg in the modern NFL these days? I mean, it's a rare sighting. You're more likely to see a game go off for over 100 points than you are for a 0. And that's exactly what the Raiders did. So it might scare some people away from him. He is projecting right now at about 25% ownership. Um, but if people feel bitten, maybe that comes down a little. He's 7,300. He's got a 28-point ceiling. Um, I kind of feel safer playing Josh Jacobs over that Aaron Jones play. And you catch a little bit more ownership with Josh Jacobs. And, it's $100 difference between the two. But Aaron Jones is just a nice play in there with a little bit higher of a ceiling. But of those two guys, I mean, I think I prefer Josh Jacobs. But yeah, those are kind of your two options there. Um, and then the cheaper guys who project really well are just going to catch you over 30% ownership. And that's Travis Etienne at 6,300. He's projecting around, 27-point ceiling, 20 points of pure projection. But again, ownership over 30%. But he's going to be in a lot of lineups this week. He's going up against Vegas. Um, it's going to be a hard guy to fade. I think I probably will, although I like him better than the other guy who's over 30% ownership right at that same price point. $200 more for Joe Mixon at 6,500. He actually has a lower ceiling and doesn't project as well as Travis Etienne. So that's kind of an interesting play there that, of the two chalk plays, I think I like Travis Etienne over Joe Mixon, but both are kind of in that same projection territory. As far as pivots in that area, uh, you're looking at Stevenson in New England. Stevenson 6,200, so right there, same price point. His projection's very similar. He's catching ownership too. He's at about 25%. So you're shaving off only 5% ownership by going to him. But he's definitely playable. Leonard Fournette might be the guy to really consider. I know he's starting to look every week. He looks a little worse, and it looks like White, the backup, is going to start cutting into his time. I have a massive trade going on this week where I'm actually I'm upgrading to Cooper Kupp off of Devontae Adams, and it might be a bad play. It involves me getting Leonard Fournette, and yeah, that might end up being a mistake because you feel it coming. Rashad White is starting to pick up a little momentum there, um, which is worth mentioning. Rashad White, 4,700, under 1% ownership. He might be a nice little, 3% sprinkle if you're doing 150 max. If you're generating 150 teams, I might throw in about 3% of Rashad White, um, just as a nice pivot off of the rest of the field and saving you a lot of money. But Lenny Fournette, 6,600, 10% ownership. That's gonna be a good tournament play, just because he checks a lot of the boxes that are needed for a good running back in tournaments. Let's see here, a little more ceiling. Let's find the highest ceiling with the lowest ownership, and that's going to be Delvin Cook, who's in a great spot against Washington. Delvin Cook is seeing an increase in action. He looks healthier than ever. Uh, he should be able to run the ball on Washington. That's a good play under 5% ownership. So if you're looking for a pivot up top, getting off of the Aaron Jones um, or the Austin Eckler, Delvin Cook is the nice tournament pivot there. Devontae Foreman is projecting under 10%. He's projecting between 5 and 10%. Decent ceiling, 6K. It's just, the other guys feel a little better. I mean, he actually does project a little bit better than Leonard Fournette uh, with less ownership. So Devontae Foreman, probably a good play there. I should like that a lot. Uh, Jonathan Taylor, nobody's playing. I mean, under 3% ownership, and I mean his projection is down to 15 points of raw projection. I mean his ceiling is projecting around 20. Going up against New England, who's been solid. They've been stopping running backs from scoring touchdowns. Um, and you need touchdowns with Jonathan Taylor. So, like, nobody's making that play, which might be an interesting pivot. I'm not sure what's going on with the Arizona running back situation. I'm not sure if we're going to see Connor this week. If Connor isn't playing, Benjamin is a fantastic play at 5,900. We've seen what he's been able to do. He's been a very solid backup. He's probably going to be a guy who's going to eat into Connor's production once Connor does come back, even if it is this week. Um, I'm probably not playing him if Connor is playing, though. But if Connor isn't, I'm smashing him. He's again under 3% ownership. I imagine if Connor's officially ruled out, that's going to skyrocket. And a really nice play this week is at 5% ownership, 6,100. Raheem Mostert of the Miami Dolphins against Chicago Bears. Chicago traded away their entire defense. There's nobody left. They called Houston to see if Lovie Smith might come back and just actually play. They were thinking, seeing if he could put a uniform on and play, because they got nobody. And Raheem Mostert's gonna be able to run all over the Chicago Bears. And if this game is projected to be slow, uh, that means we'd be seeing a lot of running, which would be me probably pivot off of Hill and play Raheem Mostert in tournaments. If I'm playing a lot of Mostert in tournaments, I'm probably going to come off of Hill, um, and maybe even a little Waddle. I'm going to bring their exposure down because I'm banking on the run game being heavy and the pass game kind of being disappointing. But I don't know because I also like that game shooting out as well. It's kind of a sneaky shootout. So I'm probably going to find a little balance. Probably going to take a Buddhist approach there and just go with a little bit of balance at the end of the day. And then wide receivers, there isn't really a guy that's like just really standing out as the guy you want to, in all your lineups. DJ Moore is still projecting really well, 5,800, 14% ownership. I like Tyler Boyd this week, 5% ownership. He's a little expensive, 6,300. He would be a smash play if he was under 5K, but 63 is going to need a little bit of production. But, Chase is down, and I feel like, Burrow is projecting pretty well. The team's projected to put up 24 points as a whole. So I would be okay playing Tyler Boyd. Romeo Dobbs, same situation, under 5% ownership, 5,300. That's probably a better play. I mean, that's $1,000 less than Boyd. Uh, and I think you're going to get similar production out of those two players. So Romeo Dobbs is probably going to be a nice, good, cheap play. Zay Jones is where all the ownership's going underneath. He's 4,100. He's involved in that passing game. It's a good game environment against the Raiders. He's projected for almost 18-point ceiling, 10% projection, 20% ownership, which is an easy fade in tournament. I mean, that's kind of like where you want to be contrarian are on plays that everybody is going to that also has a very realistic chance of failing more than succeeding. That's why running back chalk is worth taking because chances are, running back is the easiest position to project of all the positions. So, when you have a good running back who's in a good spot and he's got a good price point and the field is gravitating towards him, it's probably wise to also gravitate towards him because the chances of it going right are pretty high, which is why the ownership is going there. With high ownership at low end wide receivers, what's happening is everyone's looking to save money. So they're all going to the same guy because he projects really well at a price point where they're going to be able to get those guys in that they really want to play. Maybe playing Eckler. You could get to Eckler maybe if you play Zay Jones. The problem is those are the situations that often fail, and the pivot is usually very clear. Zay Jones, Jacksonville, 4,100. Marvin Jones, 4,200. They project almost the same, but you go from 20% ownership to 2% ownership. So if somehow Marvin Jones balls out and has a great day, uh, and Zay Jones doesn't, which is, just as likely, then you're taking just a massive gain on the field. So that's what you want to look for your pivots. DeAndre Carter, 4,300 with the Chargers. He's getting more involved. The wide receiver situation is kind of a mess with the Chargers. I mean, it's going to be a lot of Eckler, but I think DeAndre Carter has a realistic shot at his ceiling, which is 17 points, and he's under 5% ownership. That's probably the better play than, say, Marvin Jones. Definitely a better play than Zay Jones at his 20% ownership. Mac Hollins has a pretty good projection, uh, 14 points, 4,500. Hunter Renfro, we're just not seeing a lot out of him lately. Uh, Garrett Wilson's projecting really well with the Jets at 4,800. Only 8% ownership, so people are going to it. And I'm actually very comfortable when I see like between 4 and 8% ownership, because that means like the field as a whole isn't there, but smart players are. And I think that's going to be the case with Garrett Wilson with the Jets against Buffalo. They're going to be, obviously they're going to lose that game. The Jets are going to lose that game, but they're going to do their best. I mean, they're going to throw the ball, and that means a lot of opportunity for Garrett Wilson. So, I mean, it's a high over and under. It's a good game environment. So Garrett Wilson does make a lot of sense there. So that's probably the best play of the under 5K guys. Uh, Team projection. Oh, there's the game projection. Yeah, 46 over and under on that game. So that's what I'm looking at up top. I mean, generally speaking, I mean the guys I look up at top, I just look to pair with quarterbacks and game stacks, so I get kind of a good exposure on them. Guys projecting really well are DeAndre Hopkins at 7,900, but he's also looking at about 18% ownership, so you're not sneaking anything by. Right now, Jalen Waddle is projecting under 5% ownership, and he's got a decent ceiling of around 25 points. Um, he's expensive, 7,400, so there is some risk you're taking on. And again, that game is projected to be very run heavy, and but again, it's just so easy to throw against the Dolphins, and that's how teams are going to attack them. And the Bears, I mean, they're going to want to keep passing. I mean, they got nothing to lose. Um, I think they've played it safe very early in the season just to kind of just to kind of figure out their offensive line and who they are. And I think they've figured out who they are, but they still do have some concerns with the offensive line. But 23 attempts for Justin Fields last week against the Dallas Cowboys. So there's your problem. They're not throwing the ball whatsoever. He's had 23 attempts, 21 attempts, and 27 attempts in his last three games. But the beauty with Justin Fields is obviously you're getting a lot of equity on the ground. 8 rushes for 60 yards last week, 14 for 82 the week prior, a touchdown in both those games. And then 3 weeks ago, it's the Redskins. He rushed 12 times for 88 yards, 0 touchdowns. So that Miami game is really shining as a stackable game for tournaments. In cash, I'm probably gonna stay away from every player minus Mozart, who I think is a good play. Uh, Up top again, a wide receiver. I mean, the guys we think are projecting well are it's Cup, it's Jefferson, it's Hill, Diggs, Adams. Um, Mike Evans is kind of a fun play at 7,200 and under 5% ownership. All those other guys I mentioned are looking at about 10% ownership, with the exception being Devontae Adams, who right now is under 5% ownership. He had the flu last week, or he had some kind of wasn't feeling well, and that game was just a disaster. It was just one. It was an outlier, I think, for the Raiders. It was one you just want to forget, and his ceiling isn't projecting super high, and I think he has a pretty decent cornerback matchup this week. But under 5% ownership, it's going to be worth trying to get a little bit of exposure on that Jacksonville Raiders game. So let's just kind of look at game stacks at the top three over-unders on the week. Let's see what they are here. Let's just turn everything off. 49.5 for Atlanta and the Chargers, 49.5 for Detroit, Green Bay, 49.5 for, I saw another one out there, Seattle, Arizona. And that's it. I mean, that's the ceiling on the over and unders. It's 49.5. And yeah, so I mean, there's just, like I said, there's not a game that just really stands out as the, like last week you had the Detroit game, and it was just an obvious play, Detroit, Miami. And that was another mistake I made. I went more heavy on Goff than I did on Tua, and playing the double stack, which went off for the Miami Dolphins. But the games that are projecting high and over under are also generally projecting to be slower paced games. So there's just not like it's just not a sexy spot for any of these guys. The best projecting game, let's see, the slow game, the game that's projecting to be the slowest, we'll start there, is Green Bay and Detroit. As I said earlier, like Green Bay is just a vacuum of production when it comes to fantasy. They just don't get it done. I was looking at some numbers. I was really kind of trying to figure out the quarterback position through data, and a lot of roads were leaning towards Aaron Rodgers at 5,900. If this game does turn into a shootout, which again Detroit has no secondary, so the possibility is realistic. They're playing in a dome. Um, I think it's the only of the three games of 49.5 that's going to see a dome. Um, so that's important. You know, is this a game where Aaron Rodgers just finally goes off? I'm willing to make a bet on it. I'm willing to put a lot of exposure on this game because I think it's going to have the lowest ownership of the three, and for good reason. You're taking on a ton of risk. Um, Aaron Rodgers' highest fantasy game this year has been against the New York Giants at 16.88 points. So, I mean, the guy's been a turd. Um, and he was a turd in the offseason, and now he's a turd on the field. But if you think that turd can be polished, this is the week where it might just happen. His ownership isn't like super low; it's at about 8%. On the other side, on the flip side, Jared Goff projecting under 3%, but it's a $300 difference between Aaron Rodgers and Jared Goff, and Aaron Rodgers just projects so much better. Uh, and there's obviously the run game on both sides feels right. I'm a little concerned with Swift at his price point to put him in my exposure field. I mean, he's not super expensive. He's 6,400. I guess I'm probably going to max him out at about 5%, which is right about what his projected ownership is. I'm not going to go crazy into him because it doesn't look like he's back 100% yet. And Jamal Williams just eats the touchdowns. I mean, the guy's just on a touchdown feeding frenzy every week. So he's going to vulture those touchdowns. It gets very frustrating. He's 5,900. He's definitely Jamal Williams is playable as well, with small exposure. Maybe in game stacks, if you think one side is gonna take a lead and the other side is gonna be passing, and you want the side that's winning to turn it into a run game. Um, yeah, Aaron AJ Dillon projects well as well. So I mean, these are some kind of like thinner options at running back. But obviously, if this game is to go off, it's going to be through the passing game. And Green Bay, it looks like Al Lazard is going to play this week. Monitor that situation. Check out the injury report later this afternoon. Aaron Rodgers has a lot of trust in Lazard. They have pretty good chemistry. We saw him put up 20 points against the New England Patriots early in the season. He put up 17 points against the Jets. So Aaron Rodgers has thrown to him targets 8 times, 9 times, 7 times. Which game he was injured. He didn't play last week. So if he's coming back this week, I mean, 6K, he's a great stack with Aaron Rodgers. And right now, he's projected under 5% ownership. Romeo Dubs is another guy I'd look at, 5,300. A little pricey for his ceiling, but if you're playing a game stack with Aaron Rodgers, I think he's definitely worth considering. He's also under 5% ownership. Sammy Watkins, it's probably not worth playing, even in a stack. I don't think he gets you a ceiling. He's 3,600, so he doesn't need much. If he could get to 12 to 16 points, he's a good play. I just don't see it happening. And Amari Rodgers, not worth playing. Robert Tunyon is projecting really high this week in ownership. He's a good play. I think if people are playing Aaron Rodgers and they're stacking, Robert Tunyon's going to be one of those two pieces, 3,800. But again, 17% ownership. I mean, this is the guy, like I said earlier, with wide receiver. When you have really high ownership and really low priced ball catching players, uh, it's probably a good fade. So if you were to go Lazard and Dobbs and bypass Tanyan in this game, might be smart. I mean, he is seeing a lot of targets. 6 last week, 4 the week prior, and then he had an outlier of 12 targets against the Jets. Um, I believe they had like nobody play wide receiver that week. He's got no touchdowns in the last 5 games, or one touchdown in 5 games. Um, And outside of that outlier game, he's put up about 7 to 8 points. So I mean, it's definitely a guy you could pivot off of and not be too concerned that it's going to hurt you. It's just Detroit is just so bad at the covering the tight end position, at covering anything. I mean, Detroit's just not playing with a defense right now. So this game does have some appeal because of that. On the Detroit side, Armand St. Brown. I mean, you say it every week. He's still, I mean, ownership is holding steady. It's going down a little bit. He used to be over 20%. He's now falling slightly under 20% in ownership projections. His ceiling is also falling a little bit as he just hasn't had a good game in some time now. Obviously, injury played a part in that. He missed some time, but hopefully he's healthy. It looks like he's healthy. They just need to start clicking with him. We know his ceiling is very realistic. The model likes him this week. The data's good on him. He's 6,600. I mean, this is the price point where it's like, yeah, I mean, it's exciting. When he was getting over 7K, it was appropriate, because what the guy was doing. He put up 42 points against the Commanders this year on 12 targets, 2 touchdowns, 116 yards. So we've seen that ceiling, against the Eagles. He had 12 targets, did 64 yards and a touchdown, give you 20 points. So his price just started climbing. Um, he was up to 7,200. The game he got injured in, he was 7,700, 7,600, 7,100. Last week, he was 6,900. So his price has just fallen. It just crashed to 6,600, where that's like, he's a smash play this week. I think he's the guy to go to. Um, I think I called him a smash play like 2 weeks ago, and I think I mentioned he was like a semi smash play last week, and it just hasn't happened yet. But I mean, you got to love the situation, and it just feels right in this game. Brock Wright is the tight end of the Detroit Lions since they traded Hockenson to the Miami Dolphins. Brock Wright, he has a questionable tag right now, so that's worth monitoring. He's projecting around 12 points for ceiling, about 7%, 7 points raw projection. He's going to have under 5% ownership. He's 2,500. Um, he's not going to have the usage of Hockenson. I don't even believe this guy started in college. I think he was a bench player, but he's got He's got really good speed. Um, Against the Dallas Cowboys, he was on 31 of 59 snaps. He had 4 targets. He caught 4 balls and went for 57 yards and put up, 9.7 DraftKings points. So it's not a crazy play at 2,500. There's a fair chance you're going to get a good return on investment there. So I would definitely put him in the player pool for this game stack. So like I said, I like Armand St. Brown. Um, I like Brock Wright. Uh, I'm not sure what's going on with Josh Reynolds and Khalif Raymond. Um, Josh Reynolds I hear he's hurt, um, and just hasn't been playing really well. And then Khalif Raymond, I mean, it's a crapshoot. I might try to get a little bit of exposure on those guys because they're both projecting around with a 15-point ceiling and 10 points raw projection. Uh, but I don't like them. So I'm definitely playing St. Brown and Brock Wright as my main stack with Goff this week. And then, I'll probably run it back with Lazard if he's playing, or Tanya. Probably not Tanya because of the chalk. Uh, or you know what? Aaron Jones. I mean, why not? He makes so much sense, 7,400. And you're saving so much money by playing Brock Wright that it's doable to get Aaron Jones as your run back. So you're assuming that the Green Bay takes control of the game, and they just keep feeding Aaron Jones. And while that's happening, Detroit is trying to play on the comeback, and they're just throwing the ball and throwing the ball. And Armand St. Brown has a good game, and then Brock Wright, gets 40 yards and a touchdown, and that stack pays. That stack pays off. So Atlanta Falcons and the LA Chargers projects well. This is an up tempo game. This is a game that's worth investing in. Ownership right now is people are not looking to spend the 7,200 on Justin Herbert. So he's at about 5% ownership. Mariota at 5,300. Like I said earlier, he just checks a lot of the right boxes for a tournament play. He's at about 5% ownership. Um, and I think that's a side most people are going to be playing just because of the cost of Herbert. But, you know, the problem is with Herbert is you probably want Eckler in there um, because he's so much a part of that offense. And, he's 8,800. And then you're looking at Josh Palmer at 5,100. Or DeAndre Carter at 4,300. You're going to have to probably stack the DeAndre Carter with Eckler to be able to play Herbert and play that stack. This game might be worth single stacking just because of cost of just doing Eckler Herbert. Um, but I would hate to walk away from the pass equity that would be needed for Herbert to have a good day. Gerald Everett makes a lot of sense. Uh, he's 4,800, under 5% ownership, projecting really well. He has an 18-point ceiling, 11% of pure projection. I don't know what's going on with Donald Parham this week, um, but I mean, if Donald Parham doesn't play, then I mean, obviously Gerald Everett's the play, and I think Gerald Everett's a safe play regardless. So if you stack Everett with Palmer and Herbert, I think that's a pretty good contrarian game stack that's gonna walk away from the Eckler chalk. Um, it's ballsy. I wouldn't overdo that game stack, but I'm definitely going to be playing that. Um, and then I will be playing stacks with Herbert Eckler and probably Gerald Everett if his ownership is staying under 5%. I just think that makes a lot of sense. On the other end, you kind of know where the ball is going. Kyle Pitts is he's finally like the highest. There's not, by the way, there's not any stud tight ends on this slate, so you don't have to worry about a 30 ball from a tight end. Just looking at the tight end position, the highest ceiling is Foster Moreau, Kyle Pitts, and Gerald Everett. We mentioned Gerald Everett is a good play with no ownership. He's got the lowest ownership of the three, and I think that's people just kind of waiting on what's going on with Parham, and people worried about maybe a timeshare happening there, tight end by committee. Kyle Pitts, probably the best play of the three. He's 4,500. He is looking at over 10% ownership, so it's a lot, but it's not the 21% ownership Higbee is eating because of Higbee's price point of 3,700. So I like Kyle Pitts. I think Kyle Pitts is a good play in the game stack. He's finally, I think he had a good game last week. If I'm not mistaken, he scored a touchdown, and the clouds opened in the heavens, and everyone danced because Kyle Pitts finally did something. 19 Draft King points last week, 9 targets, 5 catches, 80 yards, and a touchdown. He's been getting the targets all year. His last 3 games, 3 targets, 5 targets, 9 targets. There was a game where he saw 8 targets against Seattle, 7 targets against the Saints. So he's definitely involved in this game plan, and Mariota is starting to trust him a little more. So I definitely like that. The other guy who catches the ball for the Falcons, this is really only 2, is Drake London, 4,900. He's looking at about 10% ownership. He's a good play as well. Definitely going to be putting him in the stack. I might mix in some Zacharias. He's 3,600, projecting about 8 points with 12-point ceiling, 5% ownership. So it's just a contrarian play. But I might sprinkle a little bit in. It's a good spot for the Atlanta running backs, but there's 3 of them. It's that whole running back by committee where everyone just kind of splits so that you can't even look at playing any of them. So I'm definitely attacking this game through the air. The pacing projects well. I mean, this is a really good stackable game. And I feel like just because there's 3 games with a 49.5 over under, there's no obvious game. Ownership's probably going to spread out where you're not going to have to be too concerned about overplaying the chalk game. Just kind of looking at ownership projections here. So there's 10% ownership between the 2 quarterbacks in that game. In the Green Bay Detroit game, you're looking at about 10% ownership projected, and in the other game, the Seattle Arizona game, that's the game everyone's going to. That has 20% projected ownership, and a lot of that is because Geno Smith is such a value. We'll talk about that game next. That'll be our last talking point of the evening. But yeah, so Atlanta, LA. I mean, like I said, Detroit, Green Bay is projected to be slow. This game doesn't have the ownership. I think this is the tournament play this week. I want to get creative and I want to go down to like Miami, Chicago, as I've mentioned. But I think this is a week where, like you have access to one of the top 3 over and unders without killer ownership and not a lot of heavy cost. The Chargers, free stack, their ceiling stack, if you're just going to stack their ceiling players, is very expensive. But there's pivots away from that, and I don't think you have to play Eckler, especially. Well, I mean, I guess you can play if you play in the Atlanta side. You certainly can play Eckler as the run back, and that makes a lot of sense. Just seeing, yeah. Justin Herbert's correlation, just kind of looking at correlation of the players, isn't really that high with Eckler. It's positive. It's right at 0.01 correlation, which you don't see a lot of positive correlation with the running backs. But obviously, Eckler's such a big part of the passing game. He does correlate with Herbert, but overall, I mean, when Herbert has good games, his best correlated piece is his tight end. So take that for what it's worth. So you're definitely going to want to play, Gerald Everett. I think that's actually a really good stack. I just hate not playing. I just hate playing Mariota. I mean, I feel like I've just been burnt so many times this year. But I think the stack is Mariota, London, Pitts. I mean, just go for the balls out double stack, and then run it back with no. Okay, I'm backwards. Gerald Everett. No, that's not what I want to do. I want to play Herbert, and then I want to play Gerald Everett at 4,800, and probably Joshua Palmer. But then I'm not getting Eckler. Yeah, this is a confusing game stack. See, it'd help if Clark was here. I could talk through this instead of running in circles. Um, but I don't know where he's at this week. I think he's still in. I think he's still in Dallas. I don't think he got on the plane and got back in time. So we Clark's been missing. We don't know. We filed the missing persons report. Hopefully he turns up soon. Uh, Yeah, because I want see the problem is I want Eckler as my run back, so that does mean playing the Atlanta side, Mariota, Pitts, London, and then running back with Eckler. But you are then eating all the chalk on the game. So the way to get away from the chalk is to play the LA Chargers side minus Eckler, and then run it back with either Pitts or London. All right, let's get to the last game with the 49.5 over and under, and that is the Seattle Seahawks versus the Arizona Cardinals. Um, this game is going to see all the chalk, and I mean, rightfully so. Geno Smith's been playing very well. He's priced way too low. He's 5,800. He gets you near that 30-point ceiling. He's a shade under it. He projects for about 20 points of just raw projection. He does have about 10% ownership. So you're not fooling anybody by playing this. You're definitely playing into the chalk of the week. But I see why people are playing it. Kenneth Walker the third projects really well. He's also again eating ownership, 23% ownership, 6,200. Um, and then the wide receivers, obviously Lockett. He doesn't even have the questionable tag this week, and he's been playing with that questionable tag, and he's been looking fine. And then DK Metcalf, both are under 7K, 6,400 on Metcalf, 61 on Lockett. Lockett has a little cheaper, gives him a little bit more of a projected ownership, but they're both right around 15% ownership. And they're both projecting for 24-point ceilings and 16 points projections. So both good plays. Uh, Marquise Goodwin. I mean, if you want to sprinkle in a little bit of him in stacks, I think it's okay to do that. To get off of either Lockett or Metcalf and play Goodwin in there. I mean, it's worth considering. Um, and then Seattle just has three tight ends projecting well. Arizona is really bad against the tight end. So, either Disley or Fant. They're both about 3K, 2,900 for Fant and 3K for Disley. Both projecting for about 6 points with a 10-point ceiling. Fant is getting a lot of ownership. He's almost at 8% ownership. I think I would just rather play some Goodwin in there. Goodwin does have the questionable tag right now, so monitor that situation. If he's not playing, then Eskridge probably is a good play. D Eskridge at 3,100, but I believe Goodwin is going to play this week. So yeah, I mean I would sprinkle him in a little bit in the double stack. You could also do the Ken Walker and then pick Lockett Metcalf stack. I think that's definitely playable. The Arizona side is interesting. This is a good spot for Kyle Murray. It's a good spot for the Arizona Cardinals. 10% ownership on Murray. He's expensive. He's 7,400. But he's one of the few quarterbacks projecting over 30 points as far as ceiling goes this week. And if anybody is going to be Josh Allen, it's probably going to be Kyle Murray. You don't have Lamar Jackson on this slate. You don't have Patrick Mahomes. So, I mean, there's just not a lot of firepower at the quarterback position up top. You do have Joe Burrow. That's kind of a good sneaky stack. Cincinnati, Carolina, but what are the Panthers going to do? Are they going to be able to push back? Um, that's why Joe Mixon is really projecting as such a good play this week because it just feels like this is going to be a week where Cincinnati just feeds the ball to Joe Mixon. So Joe Burrow, probably not a very good play, although he does project really well and he has a good price point. But I mean, again, it looks like everybody's just thinking that game's going to be a run game. Um, so, but if you want to play a little tournament, you want to get a little crazy. I think the Cincinnati game stack and then run it back with more on the Carolina side is a good play. But anyways, back to where we're at. 49.5 over under the Seattle Seahawks, Arizona Cardinals. Looking at the Cardinals side, um, we talked a little bit earlier about Emo Benjamin. If Connor isn't playing, I mean, I think he's a smash play. And then your wide receivers, I mean, Hopkins catching a lot of ownership this week. He's 7,900. It's just like he's green across the board. Like he just projects in every good possible data point um, you're looking at. And then Rondell Moore, I think, is a nice pivot. 6% ownership. 5,200. Ceiling of about 20 points. Projecting for about 10. I think he's a good play. And Robbie Anderson's a dark throw. If I'm doing some 150 baxes, I'm probably going to play a little bit of Robbie Anderson, and I'm probably going to keep my exposure under 5% on him. But I'm going to consider him. Zach Ertz is in a smash spot. 2% ownership. Um, Good ceiling. The problem is he's 5,100. This guy would be eating like 30% ownership if he was 3K. Because he's probably one of the better tight end plays on the week. And again, it's a week where tight end, there's just not a lot of ceiling to the tight end position, so you don't have to worry as much. So generally, when that's the case, most people, myself included, are going to look to punt at the tight end position. So when I'm looking at game stacks, that's when I want to aggressively play these tight ends that I'm probably not going to play anywhere else outside of the game stack. So I'm definitely going to have exposure on him, and most of it, if not all of it, is going to be within this game stack because I just don't see spending 5,100 on a tight end this week. Because you just don't have to worry about Kelsey, you don't have to worry about Kittle, you don't have to worry about Andrews. Uh, Waller, you didn't have to worry about anyways, even if he was playing. Um, yeah, so I mean, I think that's it for the top three games. The Jets are interesting, um, just because I mean, you know, obviously the Buffalo Bills are going to control that game, and maybe the Jets just like they start slinging the ball. You know where it's going. It'd be Garrett Wilson. Uh, yeah, Tyler Conklin, the tight end of the Jets. Also a pretty good play there. Zach Wilson, 5,100, no ownership. Right now, I'm just being honest with you. I'm not going to play the Jets side. If I'm going to run a quarterback naked, maybe it's Josh Allen. I'm sorry, it's Justin Fields with the receivers of the Jets, and then stack it with the run back from the Buffalo Bills. Um, but I mean, the Bills might just hand the ball off and do a lot of running this week and take the lead. Devin Singletary projecting well, probably the best projecting player out of it when you factor in cost. I mean, obviously Diggs is going to have the highest ceiling of any player in the slate in this game in this slate. Yeah, by wide margin. I mean, he's 30-point ceiling. The next closest with a 20-point ceiling is Gabe Davis. At 6,900. That's expensive, but that's a stack play in a tournament. If you are playing Josh Allen, play Gabe Davis. He's overpriced this week, which is going to mean he's not going to get any ownership, and it's a nice pivot off of Diggs. So if you maybe go Gabe Davis and then Dawson Knox, and then hope just Diggs has a bad day, and or you know what, Josh Allen, Devin Singletary, and Gabe Davis. That's a nice pivot with no ownership. Josh Allen projecting again 18% ownership. So people are going to be playing him. I imagine it's probably going to be a lot of single stack. Just looking at ownership where it's trickling. Uh, Diggs at 15% ownership, Allen at 18%. So that means like everybody is stacking Josh Allen with Stephon Diggs, and then they're just kind of throwing a dart at everyone else. The problem with that, with the that's why they're actually going single stack because you can't really afford to double stack because Gabe Davis is 6,900, and at that point you're just tapped. I mean, there's no ceiling. Even with a run back of Garrett Wilson at 4,800, it's just really hard to see how you could do it on a double stack. So you hope Josh Allen runs the ball, gets a rushing touchdown. You play him with Diggs, and you run back with Wilson. I think that's what everyone's doing. I think the nice pivot there would be single stack Josh Allen with Gabe Davis or Devin Singletary, and then run it back with Garrett Wilson. So that's how I'd attack that game. Jaguars, Raiders. That's a game that's just scary. Like I just have no idea how to attack it, what I want to do. Just because the Raiders had such a bad game this last week. I mean, is this the bounce back spot? Maybe. If that's the case, I think you just go with the studs because no one's playing them. You play Derek Carr, not a stud, but it gets you access to Devontae Adams and maybe a Mac Hollins if you want to double stack Carr. I mean, you almost have to double stack Carr because if Carr is getting you enough points that you're going to win a tournament, it's going to be obviously through his shoulders, and which means there's going to be receivers going off. So, I mean, I'd go Devontae Adams and Foster Moreau at 3,200. I mean, it's doable. It's doable. And then the run back probably going to be, everyone's punting with Zay Jones at the 4,100, 20% ownership. So you're probably going to want to go Christian Kirk at 5,500 and eat the 12% ownership. Uh, Maybe the nice pivot off of that. Let's see. New England, Indianapolis, absolutely not. Not even looking at that game. Um, Tampa Bay and LA, man, as I said before the show, I was kind of looking at data points for quarterbacks, just trying to figure out. I mean, this is a week I'm really going to play data. I don't have a good feel of any one game. There's not an over and under. It just feels like play all the good players and control your ownership kind of week, which are generally my best weeks. Um, so I am probably going to play a Tom Brady stack. Uh, he just, like I said, when I was looking at data and stuff, his numbers just they're nice. I mean, he could get it done. He's going through a divorce right now, so I don't know how that's playing in. Obviously, he's not the Tom Brady from a year ago, and this is definitely a swan song for him. Mike Evans, 7,200, projecting a ceiling of about 22 points, projecting about 15. And then Chris Godwin at 6,200, $1,000 less, projects for a higher ceiling at 23 points and a projection of 17. The problem there, obviously, is everyone is going to be playing that. He's getting the 20% ownership. I think he's going to be one of the key plays in a lot of people's lineups this week. That Chris Godwin, 6,200. It's just the price point is there. In Tampa Bay, what's the team projecting? The team is projecting to put up, it's implied of 22 points, so 3 touchdowns for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers is what Vegas is guessing. So, you know, Mike Evans hasn't seen the end zone in a long time, and that's what the guy does is catch touchdowns. So spending up $1,000 to Mike Evans and shaving off nearly 15% ownership makes a lot of sense in tournaments. Because, like I said, again, Chris Godwin is going to be absolutely owned. Cooper Kupp at 8,900 is going to be very hard to get to. The quarterbacks, Stafford at 56, man, $400 more for Brady. But it's just hard to build a game stack here because of the prices. Because you want to play either Godwin or Evans, and you obviously want to play Kupp. And because he's the ceiling in this game. And it's just really hard to get to Kupp and then be able to play either Godwin or Evans. Uh, Definitely. Like the Evans Kupp stack is enticing. It's just like impossible to get to because of the price. And there's just not. That's another thing. There's not a lot of punt running backs this week. I feel like last couple of weeks have been the golden age of the running back, and you've been able to spend under, you know, really $6,000. I mean, right about the $6,000 point is where everything is. $6,000 to 6,500 has been where the running back position is, and this week there's just not a lot of pivots all around. Like there's just not pivots, but punts. There's not a lot of low priced players that are enticing. Now that could change. We could get some late breaking injury news, and a guy no one's thinking could really pop. Deion Jackson. There's Taylor. It looks like he's re-aggravated his injury. If he were to sit, Deion Jackson at 5,200 would be worth playing. Uh, Khalil Herbert is always worth taking a chance on. Miami pretty stout against the run, though. I mean, they're a team you attack through the air. So, but Herbert catches a lot of balls. I think he's a nice play. And then Raheem Mostert, who he's going to be my play of the week at 6,100. He's probably the cheapest, highest ceiling running back. Devontae Foreman projects a little better, but I'm putting my money on Mostert and spending $100 more. Stevenson is right there at 6,200. So I mean, again, you are going to probably play between 6 and 6.5, uh, unless you're really going for the Eckler ceiling or the Jones, because you're going to get Walker, Kenneth Walker the third projects really well. He's 6,200. Joe Mixon 6,500. Uh, Stevenson 6,200. Foreman 6K. Fournette 6.6. So I mean, that's what the running back situation is going to be this week. Little all over the place this week. I apologize. A little scattered brain. Um, my modem's been down, and I had to install a new modem and router and all that stuff today. Uh, you contact, you got to download apps. I mean, it was crazy, but I got the internet going again, so I'm fired up. But I lost a couple hours of like preparation. Um, I mean, I was really just kind of getting into quarterback breakdowns, um, which then leads to stacks. So, not fully prepared this week, but like I said, the players I like, I think are worth playing. The Raheem Mostert. Um, Looking at the Chicago stack, or probably the Miami stack would be better, and then the Chargers. Atlanta is going to be my stack of the week. Figure out what to do in that game and make it happen. We'll give you some tips of the players I'm looking at. I think they're pretty obvious, but yeah, if you can find a way to do it, it's probably going to be without Eckler, and then just spending down at the running back position. Those guys I mentioned, and yeah, good luck to you, and hopefully we'll do this again next week. Take care, everybody.